Hi, everyone. I am Carrie Sasu. I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives for our Autism Center, and I am very happy to be able to introduce Dr. Mary Jo Archambault, who is a certified therapeutic recreation specialist with a variety of clinical and community experiences working with individuals with disabilities. She is currently an associate professor at Southern, so a colleague at Southern, and she works in the Recreation, Tourism, and Sports Management department here. Her emphasis in terms of her area of expertise is really in recreation therapy with an emphasis on community inclusion. So I anticipate that is much of what she will be talking with us about today. Before Dr. Archambault begins, I'd like to just ask folks to type your questions in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat throughout, and I will try to forward those to her at the end when we have some time for questions. I'd also ask that people keep themselves on mute. You can leave your camera on or off. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mary Jo.
Thank you, Carrie, for that nice introduction. And good morning, everyone. I hope that you have been enjoying today's conference. How many of you know what a certified therapeutic recreation specialist is? Just what I thought. Oftentimes people don't know what it is. So a certified therapeutic recreation specialist is someone who has specialized training in recreation and leisure. We utilize recreation and leisure as a purposeful intervention to maximize a person's overall health, well-being, and quality of life. We work with a diverse population and in a variety of settings, including the community, the VA, physical rehab, psychiatric settings, and adaptive and inclusive recreation, as well as school systems. So you may say that recreation is my wheelhouse and something that I am very passionate about and excited to be here today. So I have 4 objectives for today's session, and I think I can sum this up in one sentence. My goal is for all of you to understand the importance of recreation and leisure, and to walk away today having some skills or some things that you can implement with your students or with your children, whoever it is that you are working with. But before we begin, I thought it might be helpful to go over the following terms. So recreation, what are we talking about? It's generally an activity done for engagement, and leisure has many definitions. So I teach a leisure education class, and part of what we do that first class is just talk about the various definitions. But generally, when people think of leisure, it's free time and time free of obligations. This is going to be important for us to remember as we continue this morning. So recreation, why do we have this session today? Because recreation is what revitalizes us. You know, we use it as a coping skill. We use it as an opportunity to socialize with others. We use it as a reward for the end of the day, or at the end of a work week. We have something we look forward to on the weekend. Many of us work to support our recreation endeavors because they bring us such pleasure. I can tell you that individuals who did not have access to their recreation pursuits during COVID did not fare as well emotionally as those who did. As a hiker, I felt very fortunate, and being able to hike daily definitely helped with some of the stressors brought on by the pandemic. There have been several studies that have found that positive recreation or use of leisure time leads to an improved quality of life for all of us. So for all of us at this session today, like, we should be engaging in positive recreation. Unfortunately, unstructured or free time may be very challenging for individuals with ASD. This slide lists some of the benefits of recreation and leisure engagement with these individuals. So when we can find a recreation activity that someone really enjoys and engage them in it, it may reduce challenging behaviors. And all of this is backed, of course, by research. Recreation can be used to manage stress or as a positive coping mechanism. So, for many of us, we may use music, right? You're having a stressful day, you put the music on, you feel better. You go for a hike, you go to the gym, but we tend to use leisure in a therapeutic way. Definitely the more positive moments you have in your life, if you follow positive psychology, right? The less likely you are to engage in negative behaviors. Leisure and recreation can provide a sense of accomplishment. I'm currently doing virtual programming with individuals both in the communities, in the school systems. And I have a gentleman the other day, I want to tell you this really quick story, who I have a student running the program, and she said, today we're gonna be doing some drawing. And the client says, no, I can't draw. I don't want to draw. Let's play bingo. And the student's like, no, we're gonna draw. And he was kind of giving her a hard time, and she used a positive reinforcer. She said, well, after we draw, we can play Wheel of Fortune. So he said, okay. And the student had done a task analysis, had broken down the steps to drawing this turtle beautifully. The client was able to draw the turtle. And if I could share with you the excitement on his face, he jumps up from his computer, he has this picture, and he runs out to show his staff what he had accomplished. You can't put a price tag on this. You really can't. And, recreation, as we know, healthy recreation can also improve one's physical health. A big piece of recreation is that it provides an opportunity to connect with others who share common interests and may increase participation in the community. Unfortunately, with many of our students with ASD, they are rarely involved in extracurricular and school-sponsored recreation programs. Furthermore, they are less likely to be employed, meaning they will have more free time on their hands. I want to call your attention to the 27%. And remember, this is data from 2017, and these numbers have probably fluctuated upwards. Recreation and leisure is actually so important that many laws include recreation within them. So the No Child Left Behind, the Rehabilitation Act, the Americans with Disability Act, and the Individuals with Disability Education Improvement Act of 2004. Specifically, the IDEA recognizes that recreation as a related service may include a recreation or leisure assessment, leisure education, therapeutic recreation services, and recreation in community and school organizations. And I have a great handout that explains the role of the CTRS within a school setting. And at the end of the presentation, I will put this in the chat, or I will give it to Carrie and she can distribute. So this whole conference this morning has been about transitioning. Transitioning to adulthood typically includes completing high school and perhaps going to college and/or gaining employment. It's important to remember that it also includes participating in one's community and experiencing satisfying personal and social relationships, as well as having a satisfying leisure lifestyle. All too often, adolescents and adults with ASD have more restricted leisure patterns and lack the skills for leisure engagement. It is crucial that leisure skills are taught as part of the curriculum. Having leisure skills will open up opportunities for social relationships, community engagement, and an overall increase in quality of life. These are skills that need to be taught. If an individual is having difficulty structuring their leisure time, it is not going to get better once they graduate and perhaps have more time on their hands. So, how do we teach leisure? And perhaps that is why you're here today. Well, you could hire me, right? So you could consult with a certified therapeutic recreation specialist. For many of you, that is not going to be a feasible economic choice. So, what I am hoping to address today is to talk to you about developing curriculum. It's going to be important that we involve the student, that we are using an appropriate assessment, and that we always take a strength-based approach. It is important to remember that leisure curriculum cannot be a one-size-fits-all, and the research supports highly individualized transition planning. So when you think about it, you could be having a math class and you might have some students that are in a more advanced math class, and you have some students that still need to develop those fundamental skills. It's the same thing with leisure. So it's not a one size fits all. And if you could possibly, when you're working with your students, maybe if you could divide them up in two groups or three groups who are all on the same level, I think you're going to find that you are going to have more satisfactory outcomes. I also want to take a minute to talk about assessments, as we're definitely not going to have time today to dive into this topic. If you're looking at, you want to use a formal assessment, I personally like the leisure assessment inventory, as it covers the social piece. It has picture cards for 53 activities, so it's easy to use, and it's also very easy to score. However, for some of the students that we are working with, having informal conversations augmented by pictures may actually provide more accurate information. And, if you use that along with input from parents or guardians, I think you may have a very clear picture of what the student needs. So, what is leisure education? So, for some of you, this may be a new term. Leisure education is teaching individuals the skills they need to be successful during their leisure time. This may include teaching leisure skills for a specific activity, helping them identify resources, perhaps even changing the perception of what leisure is. When creating leisure education curriculum, I encourage you to ask the following questions, or even if today you're looking at your leisure education curriculum. So the first question, what does the individual need to know in order to have a satisfying leisure lifestyle? This may include skills, helping them identify when leisure time is, what resources are available. The second question is in regards to what constraints or barriers does an individual need to overcome in order to participate in recreation and leisure. And this could be, we could just say communication or social skills. You'll notice that the third bullet is something that I actually added. So I said the author was unknown on this slide, but the bullet in red is something that I added as I was putting together today's presentation. What activities naturally lend themselves to the individual's characteristics? So instead of looking at one's behaviors or characteristics as a barrier, such as restricted interest, can we kind of turn this around and perhaps see this as a strength and something to guide us as we're introducing activities? And we're going to talk about this quite a bit a little bit later. The next question is, what else do we think the individual needs to know? So perhaps it's internet safety or safety in the community. And lastly, but most importantly, is what is it that the individual wants to know? So we need to have buy-in from the people we're working with. So I would like to introduce you to the four components of the Wake Leisure Education curriculum. As I'm presenting these components, I will also be bringing in recent research to support these four areas. This really, I feel, is a great foundation when we're talking about leisure education. So the first one is choice. Individuals with ASD tend to resist or be reluctant to try new activities. During leisure education, students should be exposed to a variety of activities based on their interests or preferences. Students should be encouraged to make choices regarding leisure throughout the day. So I just want to, I want to really talk about this one for a minute. So at one of the places that I worked, every morning my clients had a schedule, and each of us, so everyone that worked there, so whether you were a therapist or whether you were um, one of the CNAs, but whoever you were, everyone sat with a client, and we did day planning with them. So they would have their schedule, and this was in a clinical setting, so they would have their schedule. So of course there'd be breakfast on there, and then we would talk to them, well, what happens after breakfast? And they would fill in their schedule, like brush their teeth, do hygiene, and then they might have a group they would have to go to. One of the things that we had is there were free spots on the schedule, and we would encourage our clients to, okay, you have a free period at 2 o'clock. What are you going to do at this time? And it had to be related to recreation and leisure. So for some individuals, you might need to have picture cards for them to choose from, or maybe they're at a point where they could name an activity. Oftentimes I find that it's through prompting. Now, if an individual decided at 2 o'clock they wanted to play cards, this was great, because then my next question would be, who are you going to play cards with? So at that point, the individual would look around the room. They would identify someone. I want to play cards with Joe. So the student and I we'd walk over to Joe, and then the client would have to ask Joe if he would like to play cards. Joe, would you like to play cards? If Joe said yes, then the student would go back and write that in their schedule. Cards with Joe at 2 o'clock. If Joe said no, then that's another great opportunity to practice those social skills, saying, okay, well, thank you anyway, perhaps another day. I have to tell you, I honestly think you could implement this in a school system. Like, where is the free time that students have during their day? And could this possibly be something that you could implement where, back in my day, it was study hall. I don't even know if we have study halls anymore. But during that time, like, could we encourage students to ask another student to engage in activity? Could we encourage them to make a choice about what they want to do, and really making it focused on leisure? So when we're talking about, choice, one of the things that's really difficult at times is individuals pursuing new leisure activities. So I have some guidelines here, which I think will be very helpful for you. So the first one, activities should match the individual's interest. I think many of us are already aware of that, right? So if we want to get buy-in, we want to make sure that this activity is within their interest level. The second one on here, it should be of interest of family and friends. And let me explain that. So let's say I'm working with a student and I teach them how to play chess. If when they go home, their family doesn't play chess and none of their friends play chess, that skill is going to become lost. Like, they're not going to have anyone to do it with, and it's really just going to be a school-based activity. So if we can connect them with activities that their peers are doing or that their family is doing, This will give them an opportunity to participate in that activity, but it's also a great conversation piece. The next thing is that it's important that the activity is age appropriate. So if we have a 17-year-old who enjoys playing with Play-Doh, maybe introducing modeling clay. If the same 17-year-old enjoys playing with the Matchbox cars, maybe we introduce model cars to them. This is important because it will provide them with more opportunities to engage in activities with peers of the same age. We want to make sure that the activities that we're introducing are going to be readily available and can be done in a variety of environments, such as home, community, or school. We also want to make sure it's economically feasible. So if you are introducing a student to golf, but they're never going to be able to afford to do this on the weekends or in the summer, then you're really setting them up for failure. So making sure that economically that they are going to be able to sustain this activity. And we also wanted to make sure that it has the potential for being frequent and having long-term participation, because this will allow for predictability and routine, which is really important for individuals with ASD. It's also important to keep in mind the social demands of the activity. If the social demands are too high, the individual may become anxious and refuse to participate. The next part of the Wake Leisure Education model is on independence. Wouldn't it be great if our students, children could independently structure their free time? Independence should be a major goal of your leisure education program. We as educators will not always be there to structure individuals' free time or plan out activities. As educators, we need to establish an environment that promotes independence. I was working with this young student a couple of weeks ago. We did the assessment. The student identified she loved movies. She particularly loved horror movies. So I'm like, great, because all right, I got her interest. So, okay, I'm gonna run with this one. So the following week, we say to the young woman, listen, I know you enjoy going to the movies, and today we're going to learn how to plan a trip to the movies. She looks at me, she says, I already know how to plan a trip to the movies. I said, wow, that's great. Could you just tell me what the steps are? Teach me how to plan a trip to the movies. Well, she says, all you got to do is put your name on the list. Okay, so let's think about this. This individual is not going to be living in this environment for the rest of her life. And at some point, if she was to live independently or semi-independently, it's really going to be important for her to understand the steps to plan a trip to the movies. So there are different things that we can do to promote independence. We can teach the skills for the activity, such as dribbling, shooting baskets, and help students understand the rules of the activities. We can also help individuals differentiate between leisure time and work time or school time, and where that leisure time might fall in their day. We also should be teaching individuals how to express their preferences. So choice making is really important. And that's one of the things I enjoyed about the place I worked, where we had the schedules, because it really encouraged our clients to make choices about what to do during their free time, which is very empowering. For initiation, this tends to be an area that many individuals lack in. So how do you teach someone to initiate a recreational activity? Let's say that the activity is painting. We already know that this individual enjoys to paint. So maybe the first time we do painting with them, we actually have visual pictures of the steps. So my first picture is going to be, what are the supplies I need? So that picture would have your paint, your water, your brushes. And then the rest of your pictures, if you do a task analysis, so if you were to break down that activity into smaller steps, right? And have a picture for each of those steps. At first, you would do the activity with the individual. And that means that you would, as we're gathering supplies, I would refer to the picture. We would gather our supplies. Then we would go to our next step and so forth and so forth. Eventually, the individual will be able to do this activity without any prompts from you. They will be able to look at their pictures. And then hopefully, the goal would be at some point there would be no pictures, right? So this is a great example also of like the least restrictive environment, where gradually we start taking away some of those modifications that we had up. The last thing I want to talk about is problem solving. Problem solving we should be doing before the person engages in the activity. What I mean by that is that if we can identify potential problems within the activity and how to deal with these problems. So we may use a social narrative or pictorial reminders. So what are potential problems? So there's not enough supplies. I'm at a ceramic class, I'm running out of paint. Okay, I'm gonna have to ask for more supplies. The directions that were given were not clear, I don't understand them. Or what if you've been working with someone and they've been going to a yoga studio with you and they go for the first time on their own and there is no spot for their yoga mat? That right there could end the activity. So if you can do that problem solving prior to engagement in the activity, it is going to be very helpful. Our next component is planning. It is recommended that education take place in community environments where the student is likely to go and utilize as an adult. Each community organization involves the use of different skills and competencies. For example, going to a 24-hour gym is different than going to a yoga class. Many students find it difficult to learn a skill in one place and use it in another. By providing opportunities in the actual environment, there is a greater chance for students to carry over the skills. So I want to, there's two thoughts on this. One thought is that during my leisure education curriculum or during my leisure time, I want to introduce my students to as many opportunities as possible within the community. The other school of thought is that maybe instead we pick 7 community resources. We pick like 7 or 8. And for each one, we practice for a month. So if October is going to be yoga, during the month of October, when we do our community outing, we go to the yoga studio, the same yoga studio every Thursday. This is really going to help increase the individual's self-efficacy. They're really going to feel more comfortable going to the yoga studio. They're going to work on building up their skills. And then at the end of the month, perhaps like there's an opportunity where, okay, would you like to sign up for this? Would you like to continue this on your own? As we are planning for leisure engagement and recreation, we need to be aware of some of the constraints or barriers our students may face. So extrinsic barriers are outside of the student, and they may include like lack of information, so they're unaware of various options. They, maybe they don't have a driver's license or they don't have a car, so understanding how to use public transportation. Scheduling conflicts. I want to play tennis, but I have no one to do this with. I don't know what resources are available. And the last one is poor quality services. So if a individual has a negative experience, it may influence their perspective of that activity in the future. So it's really important, that we can make these recreation experiences as positive as possible. So leisure education should include identification and problem solving of barriers. The solutions may include direct instruction and teaching skills for participation. It may also include you taking steps to foster relationships between students and community members. So for instance, if I lived in the New Haven area, I would definitely want to introduce my students to the New Haven Park and Rec Department. Or maybe there's a Taekwondo studio down the street. One of the things that I found really interesting, right, when I was putting together this presentation is something known as opportunity mapping. And this is an approach in which school systems, and if you're an organization, so if you're a Chapel Haven or a Marrakesh, um, organizations identify school-based recreation and leisure activities available to all adolescents, either in the school or the organization. So this could include clubs, sports, or volunteer opportunities. Students are then taught to identify and select the activities they are interested in. So this is a great stepping stone in a safe environment because they already know their school environment or their environment at, we'll say, Chapel Haven. Individuals with ASD may often have characteristics that may at first present as barriers. Understanding these characteristics may actually provide you with clues to activities they will be successful in. So, some strategies to improve social functioning. I'm going to go over these very briefly, but there is a lot of research on these. So if you're interested, you can definitely, you know, enhance your own knowledge of these. So your peer-mediated approaches, which is when we engage typically developing pairs as social models to improve social initiation, responses, and interactions. Self-management strategies is when the individual themselves log their behaviors and then they obtain reinforcement when their performance meet a pre-established criteria. Social stories, which are narratives used to illustrate certain situations, problems, and how to deal with them. And then your virtual and role playing may actually provide opportunities to practice skills in a controlled setting. So definitely not as threatening. Another thing to be aware of before introducing an activity are the social demands of that activity. Does the individual have to interact with others to be successful? How much interaction is required? Are there clear times when we have to interact? So if you think about the game of chess, the only time I really have to interact with you is if I am saying check or checkmate, and then it's really not to initiate a conversation. It's just something that I'm saying. If the social demands are too high, find a version of the activity that has less social demands. So playing the game horse, the basketball game where you throw if you make the ball into the hoop and the other person doesn't, they get an H. So playing horse instead of a basketball game is going to have a lot less social demands. So individuals with restricted interest may find it more challenging to develop leisure skills in a variety of areas. So what are some things you can do? You can find activities that have repetitive actions. So there's certain card games and video games, which is why video games are often so popular. You can also find activities that are very structured. So if you think about line dancing or a yoga class, where every week we are doing the same routine. As always, it's important to incorporate activities that align with an individual's interest. You may find that they will have a longer attention span for these activities, and they may be able to focus more intensely on them. So I had a brother who was athletic. My mom got him into sports. So we need to play to people's strengths. Many individuals with ASD have strong visual spatial ability. And that's the ability to manipulate two-dimensional or three-dimensional figures. So when you think about 3D puzzles or Rubik's Cubes or Legos. So play to the individual's strengths. Sensory issues may either have a negative or a positive impact on leisure. Therefore, it is vital for you to understand any sensory preferences or dislikes. Secondly, you should introduce activities that offer the preferred sensory stimulation, whether that's rocking or lifting heavy objects. And thirdly, perhaps the individual is engaged by cause and effect activities. So offer electronics or, computer games. So I know we just went over a lot in a really short period of time. I just want to really quickly give you some qualities that make leisure materials and activities more successful. So having those clear rules is going to be really important. I suggest having visual representation of expectations because it will make it easier for individuals to follow. Having a well-defined beginning and end that is easily recognized. So whether that is the lights flickering or a bell ringing, making them predictable, clear visual representation of what to do, and the rest of these you can just read. Okay, some other qualities. We want activities to be challenging without being overstimulating. So it's finding that balance. You don't want the activity to be too easy or too hard, making sure it's suitable for their ability level. And then, it's really important that we make recreation a positive experience, and we can do this by providing positive reinforcement and encouragement. One of the things I just wanted to get in here quickly is that, one way we can reduce stressors is to really increase the predictability of the environment through the use of written or picture schedules and consistent routines. And lastly, I hope that we all remember this quote, because as important as math and English are, so are having the skills to engage in one's leisure time. It's equally important. So thank you all very much. And if you have questions, and I'm sorry because I know that we're right at the end, but you can also email me and I will be happy to get back to you.
Thank you so much. That was so much in the way of valuable information, again, in a very short period of time. And I know that the breadth of your knowledge and expertise probably makes it very difficult to make it, to present so briefly on this. So thank you very much. Mainly, there were a lot of comments about how valuable the information really is and wanting to share this information. And so one question that did come through was, what can ASD students do in terms of activities with others after high school? That was one question, if you'd like to quickly respond to that one.
That's actually, it's a very broad question. And, one of the things, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but here at Southern, we actually have a new building that will be constructed by 2022, right, in January. And in that building, we will actually have a room where we are going to be doing leisure education for individuals in the community who have ASD. So that would definitely be an option. I also know that a lot of the park and recreation departments in the area are definitely trying to do more with that transitioning age group. So reaching out to the park and rec department to see what opportunities are available. So it's really going to depend on where you're living, what the interest is of the individual, because it might be something that could be met through a Taekwondo studio rather than a park and rec department.
Yeah, that is a very broad question. I'm sure it varies greatly in terms of matching individual interests too. As you said before, all of those various criteria are important things to factor in as well. And then one last very simple question before we go. Folks were asking whether they would be able to have access to your PowerPoint. I know that we're recording it, so if you prefer it just go out as a recording, we can do that.
Oh, of course they may have access. So by having access for the PowerPoint, you will also get the link I had put in for the role of the recreational therapist and the school system. And a lot of individuals are not even aware of that we are in the Individuals with Disability Education Act. So we are that related service. So, maybe that's something we'd start drawing upon more.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this very valuable information. As I noted in the chat, this recording will be available via our website. Right now, there's just shy of 10 minutes before the parent panel begins, but I just want to thank you again, Mary Jo, for offering all that you did today. Thanks.
My
for coming,
pleasure.
everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great day.